Hit record. Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, Faisal,
Continue. Yeah.
what's up? Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
it's good to see you. I've been a fan of yours for a while. I've listened to your interviews on Dave Rubin. I knew about Ideas Without Borders probably 3-4 years ago or so. I think I'm not sure when you get started, but I'll ask you about that.
That is exactly when we got started. It was 4 years ago. We just
Dude,
celebrated the 4-year anniversary a couple months ago.
that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So I know your time is precious. You're a busy man and you're doing really important things. So I couldn't be more excited to have a bit of your time. But you're in New York. I'm in Los Angeles. I want to tell my viewers, all three of them, I love you. So I saw you in person at the Bitcoin conference in Miami, and we're definitely going to talk about crypto and how we both have a mutual interest in that. But I had to come up to you and say, hey, what's up, man? Because I saw you on Dave Rubin. I've been a fan of yours. You came here, I believe, in 2013 from Iraq as a refugee. There's so much knowledge you have of not only the world, but you have a really great sense of the parallels between sort of values and culture, I would say, all over the world. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So tell me about like your background. I know I've listened to a bunch of interviews with you, so I know you've talked about your background a lot, but I think it's definitely important to sort of set the foreground for anyone who isn't familiar with you, to kind of get an idea of your history and why you're doing the things you're doing today.
Definitely. So as you mentioned, I was born in Iraq. I was born after the first Gulf War, so that's the 1991. And one anecdote that I like to mention, which really kind of, I would say, crystallized kind of the experience of living under Saddam regime, was in 2005. I was watching a documentary. I think it was on National Geographic, and it was about the first Gulf War and about Iraq invading Kuwait and the tanks and everything. And I was like, really? That's what happened? Because was not what I was taught in school. What I was taught in school was Iraq get invaded by 33 countries led by Israel, and we won that war. And then I brought my dad, and I was like, okay, like, is this what really happened? And Iraq invaded Kuwait, and there was that part. He said, yes, I know it was happening, but if I tell you the story, I would be in trouble and you would be in trouble. And by being in trouble, meaning leaving life, meaning you're getting killed by the intelligence services. So the Iraq that I grew up in, first under the regime of Saddam Hussein, and then secondly after the chaos that came afterwards in 2003, was really like a conversion from like 1984, in which you had an absolute authoritarianism, and that was really the last years of his regime. So he was in that kind of very paranoid mode, in which the rumor was one out of 4 people was in the intelligence. So you have to not just be aware of what you say in front of other people, but there might be people in your family who are part of your intelligence. So it creates this kind of psyche of you're constantly aware of what you say around people that are around you, and not your family, your relatives, all of that stuff. Because one of them could, if you say the wrong thing and was like, oh, I disagree with the regime, or what he did was wrong, they might report you to the intelligence, and then the next day you disappear. And that is kind of, so generally when I try to explain authoritarianism, because then people think of authoritarianism as like, oh, it's like people, the government banning things and all of that stuff, but it's also a psyche. It's a culture that they create in which people become, everybody's afraid of each other. Everybody's really kind of faking it as much as possible to show that they love the regime and etc. And you're always in this constant fear. Then the Iraq War, the Iraq War happened when the US came in, removed that really kind of the prison guard. And with the prison guard is now you have everybody just out of the prison, and those who have the guns and who have the power, eventually the ones that took over. And that's where the militias, so my neighborhood, which was a residential neighborhood, most of the people who used to live there were most of Saddam Hussein's generals. And then these houses became all empty, and they were replaced by Al-Qaeda. So we moved from authoritarians who were a green uniform to absolute chaos, in which militias took over. And my neighborhood is in West Baghdad, what was kind of central between that Al-Qaeda and the militias that was fighting against Al-Qaeda. So
Is this in the
what I usually
90s? Al Qaeda had taken over.
no, in 2003. That
Yeah,
was in
gotcha.
2003.
Yeah,
So,
after 9/11.
so that's the post war. And so an unusual day, you have some rockets flying to you from a different neighborhood. And with Al Qaeda took over, that was more theocratic religious rule. So you have if you they say a woman and a man holding hands, they come in and beat them. Sometimes they kill people for smoking. They kill people on the streets, they behead people. So that is like, in a way, which is kind of sad to say, is a moderate version of what came after, which is ISIS, in a way that made Al-Qaeda look like a peace activist organization. And so what came in afterwards, basically, the situation kept deteriorating worse and worse, to the situation that dissent became amazingly difficult. Living, forget about dissent or even having any political opinion, but really just living your life. It became more and more impossible. And my crazy self, when I was in my teenage years, decided to speak out against some of these atrocities and the extremism and sectarianism that was advocated for by Al-Qaeda and the militias, and that kept me in a local death list that I had to leave the country in 2009. I left to Lebanon, from Lebanon to Malaysia, from Malaysia to the United States as a refugee in 2013, when I got accepted. And here I am. I'm still alive, so that's something to celebrate.
Wow. Yeah. I think that there are a lot of people in this country that talk about having a rough past. It's hard to, I don't want to play the oppression Olympics game, but if you walk down the street and you're seeing people, you've seen killings, and you just know that that's going on around you on a day-to-day basis, and you're on a list, and you have to worry about your family being a spy or intelligence, as you mentioned. Growing up, making less than $40,000 a year or something, it kind of pales in comparison. If that's, but I don't want to play the oppression Olympics, but
just maybe if, that's actually one thing that I've been grappling with. One of the things that I was in my friend's apartment in New York, and I was in a patio. Suddenly, there was kind of revelation came from the sky, and the revelation was why I've been safe for a while. I don't have to look over my shoulders for survival, because I didn't really think about it much. And then it's like all of a sudden it got me that that was, I think, 2018, and I was like, wow, I've been 5 years of my life really not looking around when I'm walking the street. With that being said, I think is that oppressions are, as you mentioned, the oppression Olympics. I'm not a big fan, because I think that generally speaking, and that may be a generalization, but I think some of it has truth, is that those who actually have been through a lot or some kind of suffering and oppression do not like to be like, oh, I've suffered a lot. You don't matter because I suffered more than you did. And let's have a dialogue in which I am the victim and you are the oppressor. I think many of those who actually have a very authentic experience with oppression of all different sorts tend to not downplay the kind of difficulties that other people face.
Right. I do think that there's an insight gained by people with a history like yourself. There's an insight gained into the broader, as I mentioned earlier, sort of the world, a more worldly perspective, where you can you can differentiate between the contrasts of human experience maybe more. I think it's just a worldlier view, whereas the alternative is, well, no, see, as a gay, black, transgender person or whatever, I've experienced more oppression than you, simply based on those immutable characteristics. And I think that those are sort of the differences there.
Yeah, and looking at it, I think is that there is one insight that I think is important, is looking at oppression as a spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. And there are definitely things that I experienced and others are, and there's actually something. I've tried to learn more about the subject, is that on the brain level, is that our brains are kind of very bad in analyzing things, and sometimes is that even like things that are might be bad in the feeling, but at the same time on the large picture is actually not.
Right.
We still, and sometimes even as far as some research I've read, it actually feels the same way. So like the person living in a war and the brain level can feel the same amount of trauma as somebody who might be facing something difficult that is not anyway related to war. And I think is that having that kind of being able to differentiate what's what, I think definitely is helpful to navigate some of the challenges that we face on day-to-day basis.
That's a very stoic outlook, I would say, very kind of a zen outlook. Yeah, we only have so many chemical reactions, I guess, that can go off in your brain, and as primates, we can be triggered by a long line at Starbucks, or maybe by bombs, and being on a list.
It's something that's really, I mean, fascinating in terms of like how our brains process information, how they process suffering and all that stuff. And that's why, like, I think is that and I've seen like some people do it. I don't think it works whatsoever. Like if you say you have your friend, I don't know, have flu, and you tell them, well, it's better than cancer. I don't think it works in making them feel better in any shape or form. It generally, like the way that they feel is they feel suffering, and I think any way to minimize that might not actually work.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like there's actual physical, chemical, biological suffering, and then there's the sort of mental perspective and psychological aspect there. And the older I get, the more I try to differentiate the two and separate. Well, okay, I'm experiencing physical pain, yes, and to a certain degree, I'm of course going to feel that and not be able to completely. If someone chops off my hand, I'm not going to be able to be zen and in the moment. But I try to take the stoic approach and understand, well, if I'm late for a meeting and I'm waiting in line at Starbucks, well, what can I control? What can't I control? That's the sort of Buddhist stoic approach. But tell me about your transition coming to the US and how that sort of transpired. Were you in Malaysia at the time when you came here?
Yeah. So long story short, I mean, I have a family that lives in the UK. So the idea was that I go and pursue education in the UK, and there was no British embassy, and you could not apply for a visa from Iraq. And then I end up in Lebanon from the idea of applying for a visa, and then I got rejected a couple of times. And it was at the time UK, and I think some sense still does, have a sort of a travel ban on Iraqis, and to some extent, I mean, where I fit the criteria, male, young, screw this guy. So I tried to apply multiple times over and over again, and I get rejected. And at the same time, I was accepted in university in the UK. And the person who was at admissions was like, well, I'm really sorry you're facing this. We have a similar education that we offer in Malaysia. So how about you just go to Malaysia and then continue your education there? And it's in a way a much safer country than Lebanon, because Lebanon and Iraq are pretty much controlled by the same militias and controlled by the very similar dynamics, even though Lebanon is a bit safer by Iraqi standards, but it's not really safe by all standards. So I left from Lebanon to Malaysia to further actually British education. At the same time, I applied for refugee status through the United Nations Commission for Refugees, called the UNHCR. And it took a lot. I mean, I'm very grateful. It took, I mean, some cases they give you this thing is like, oh, it might take somewhere between 3 months to 30 years. This is the time frame that they give you of when you get maybe accepted to leave from a third party country to a country where you'll be settled. And I was able to get it, I think, in around 3 years. And through that, I was able to kind of improve my English, kind of get some education, and be able to kind of work to generate some income. And then in 2013, I was settled in Houston, Texas.
Wow.
And when I arrived, and I landed in Los Angeles, that's where I landed, through the LAX airport. And then from that, I lived in Houston. And then there was something cool happened, which is I've made a post on Facebook. And prior to that, I had like a blog that's followed by a lot of people around the world. And I made a post. It's like, oh, this is my first 4th of July in America. Like, what would be the best place to go? And then there was a family which was following my blog, would be like, Washington, D.C., that's where you should be for celebrate 4th of July. What are you doing in Texas? So they bought me a flight ticket, which these are people I don't know. So there's like, I was like, this is too good to be true. but I'm from Iraq. Like, what could go wrong? Like, if they're gonna end up being terrorists, I can just run away. I've been there, done that. They flew me from Houston to Washington D.C. to celebrate my 1st of July, and then they live in the area, so I went to visit Monticello, and Thomas Jefferson is one of the people that I've enjoyed reading since I was a teenager. So I've been to that, and then with this family, we developed like a very special bond. And they told me, it's like, well, we have a daughter studies in New Mexico. We have a 2-bedroom house. How about come live with us? Like, there is more opportunities for you to pursue in the East Coast than you would in Texas, considering what you do and what you care about. And I was like, really? And then I was like, okay, let me do it. And then I moved from Houston to Washington D.C. After that, and then I was able to get a job within like a couple of weeks after arrival to DC, and then I got a job that promoted me to move to New York, and that's where I am, and that's what I founded my organization. So my trajectory was like Houston, Texas, Washington D.C., and then New York, where I pretty much most of my American experience is in New York. I've been living here for I've been living in America since 2013, but I've been living in New York since end of 2014. So pretty much now 7 years or 8 years in the city, and it's a great place to be.
It's definitely a great place to be. Yeah, in all the definitions of the word "great," for sure. Yeah, there's a great smells. There's great buildings and great people. But no, I lived there for 15 years. But what was the experience going from Iraq from Lebanon to Malaysia to Los Angeles, and then I mean you just flew into LA and then to Houston? Were there noticeable differences along the way? Did you feel like a fish out of water like right away, or what was your perspective, and how did it change within those year or two?
I mean, so for me, it was definitely gradual.
Mm-hmm.
So Lebanon is better than Iraq. Safer.
They call Beirut the Paris of the East, right?
Yeah. Yes. However, I think they lost that title kind of years ago because of what happened to them is exactly what happened to us. Is the almost destruction of the state and replacement with this chaotic militia state that they have. So Iraq, however, Lebanon is definitely better than Iraq, and Malaysia is definitely better than Lebanon. So in Malaysia, in a way, have kind of more infrastructure, and they're very much connected to the international world to some extent. And were
you in Kuala Lumpur? Is that
exactly? Yeah. Yes, I was in Selangor, which Kuala Lumpur which is a province that Kuala Lumpur is part of. Mm-hmm. So the thing with Malaysia is that it acts as like this third party country in which many of the universities around the world are based at. So in that way, anybody who wants to be a refugee or wants to escape to kind of a more developed country, that's what Malaysia is for.
It's a jumping off point, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, yeah, exactly. So Malaysia was definitely more developed, and obviously America is far more developed than Malaysia. And so it was definitely a gradual, but I was able to be introduced to the world kind of more gradually, especially like with the kind of the culture change and cultural difference. My first introduction to America was actually a tank in front of my house. That's how I got to know about America. Was actually my neighborhood is on the highway in which the U.S. Army invaded Baghdad from. So my first intro to the United States was really a bunch of tanks, Abrams tanks and Humvees, going in front of my elementary school, which was close to my house, was a military base of the Iraqi army. So the tanks were bombing my elementary school, and the elementary school were firing back. So that was not necessarily the best intro to the United States. It was a more violent one. But when I landed here, I mean, I think is that I was already to some extent predisposed to some of the ideas that I think the United States is founded on in terms of like believing in free speech and openness and religious freedom and all of that stuff. That when I was in a way like an outsider to some extent in my own country that I was born at. I mean, my neighborhood, unfortunately, like after like the years of Al-Qaeda, etc., is that to be remotely liberal or to be a bit open-minded is an extreme position in an area in which if you, I don't know, I mean, not necessarily believing gay people should, I mean, believing gay people should not be killed is an extreme position where I grew up in. So in a way is that I was already pushing against that. So when I came to the States, I was already embracing lots of the American values and kind of the American cultural norms. That was not much difficult for me to integrate and to really like go with society. And that was the time. So as I was mentioning about my blog, and I already had some following, social media following in the United States. And the moment I announced that I was the person running the blog, because I was running it anonymously. And I was like, oh, this is me. I'm the person who's running it. I'm Faisal. I'm a refugee. I came to the States, etc. And then I ended up on the speaking circuit. So I started getting invited pretty much left and right, West Coast to Midwest and all of that. And then I get to see more of America and get to understand some of the nuances in American society. And because some were like, America, like, it's so great you're here, like this is an amazing country. And then at the same time, like, oh, this country sucks, like brown people are being shot left or right, like you came to the wrong place. You should have gone to Sweden and gone to Canada, like they're more like less racist and all of that stuff. And I was like, oh, like, is it like brown people are being shot left and right? Like shit. And but the thing is, like, again, it's like I come from a very low standard. So for me, it's like, I mean, what could go wrong? So then I realized that many of these statements are mostly based on like ideological sense, not necessarily based on reality. And so anyway, so that's like my kind of entry to the American conversation at large. But I mean, the experience generally has generally been amazingly positive. And America is obviously not monolithic in any shape or form. But I think it's like, generally speaking, is that America is very open as far as my experience goes. And obviously I live in the big cities. So I don't live in areas in which might be more hostile to like people who look like me or speak like me. However, I think is that overall, like my experience cannot be like, actually it's pretty positive. And I love it here. Became a citizen as of 2 years ago. And I'm definitely using the American passport as it should be used.
Nice. Yeah, right.
And traveling around the world, because I had a lot of restrictions just with the Iraqi passport of not being able to see the world. And now with the American passport, I have a decent life here in America, and I'm able to see more of the world that I was not able to access previously.
That's awesome, man. So tell me about Ideas Without Borders. So growing up in Iraq, obviously your time there, there was Desert Storm, and then the Iraq War started, and then 10 years after the Iraq War started, I guess you got out of there. What tell me about Ideas Without Borders. What influenced you? What led you to start this I guess it's a nonprofit, and what exactly do you guys do?
Sure. So back to like the days of Saddam and the days after, is that one of the few privileges that I have is that my parents taught me English since a very young age. I was able to speak English, not very well, but I was able to understand a bit. And then when the war happened, so before 2003, before the second war, there was no internet in Iraq. There was intranet, and then if you access the internet, if you're lucky, then you might able to be immediately, the government will know that you access the banned websites and you get arrested. So after 2003, the internet kind of opened up, and really we in Iraq, we started having some version of free press. We're able to like read different magazines and newspapers, etc. And I was noticing a massive difference between what is available in English and what's available in Arabic. And not only there is very little content in Arabic on the internet, there is very little factual content in Arabic on the internet. It's like a very significant amount of the content that you see online is either state-controlled media, so that's the media pushing things, or it's by militias, or by conspiracy theorists and former influence, which is I get to learn by actually former Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany had a very big presence during World War II in the Middle East to actually spread many of their ideologies. So like you go to a bookstore over there, and they have like Mein Kampf like in front of the bookstore, and
Wow.
and that's like one of the most read books of the bookstore is Mein Kampf, and some are like the Pericles of the Orders of Zion, which is a Russian conspiracy on Jewish people, and then there's like the Communist Manifesto and all of this is like, so this is what is available for.
So you're telling me extremist Muslims take a small issue with Jews? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and some of that actually influences that came in, and not just religious extremists, it's actually Arab nationalists. The Arab nationalism and some of its ideologies actually has been influenced by a lot of kind of 40s ideology from Nazi Germany, etc. So that is what many people consume on day-to-day basis in terms of information. And more as I get introduced through like being able to know things about freedom of speech and know about kind of the values and available, my goal, even when I was a high school student, I translated segments of the Bill of Rights into Arabic, and I was giving it into some of my friends in high school. And I've always wanted to be kind of this kind of cultural ambassador to bring in different ideas and different perspectives. And then I came to the States, and I mean, there are different routes that immigrants take in terms of how they live here. Some want to be like, screw where I came from, I'm just here to start a new life, and I'm just gonna do whatever and make more money and then live a good life. That's the approach that most people follow, including members of my family. But for me, it was like, okay, so like I'm now in a free society. I have the ability to actually translate, and I know a lot of groups that are in the Middle East who might, if they need just a bit of support and funding, we might be able to really make many of these ideas accessible to the masses that was not before. And that's what the mission is, making inaccessible information accessible. And so with that, I established a team of about 120 people across the Middle East and North Africa, in which most of what they do is really making banned, sometimes unfortunately banned, censored content available in Arabic for people to be consumed. And then I teamed up with a lot of social media and influencers, etc. So we built a following of 4.8 million as a distribution network. So on that we were able to reach as many people as possible. And now, as of 2021, we actually built up a media production company. So now we have explainer videos about the pencil theory, and like George Stuart Mill on liberty, people getting to know about books that are censored, 1984, etc.
So this one?
Yes, so that's on liberty. That is the graphic novel of liberty, exactly. So,
I haven't read it in Arabic yet, but once I learn, I'll give it a go.
It's quite similar. Yeah. It's the same. Exactly. So this is one of the books that we have made available, which is John Stuart Mill's graphic novel of the liberty, which is like an artist took the text and also made a lot of kind of art into it. So that is really kind of the big thing. And we also do a lot of physical on the ground work. We won a grant last year that we actually, today is the end of the project, in which we rebuilt one of the libraries that ISIS destroyed.
Wow.
So we are the one who are with the group of partners. Some are responsible for the building, the architecture, and we're responsible for the books. So we became the main supplier of the books, in which we put all the books in the shelves.
No more Mein Kampf, right?
No more Mein Kampf, exactly. Most of the books we did were academic books that the university requested, as ISIS destroyed everything, and also some of the books from John Stuart Mill to Adam Smith to most of the kind of the Enlightenment philosophers. So really, the bigger mission is making accessible information accessible. Starting first with the Middle East and North Africa, but I think there's definitely room to expand into other areas in the future. But I think the Middle East for now is more than enough in terms of handling the logistics. And what I like to emphasize is that, I mean, when you are like kind of in those closed societies and you're always not only able to express yourself, you don't know if there are any like-minded people out there. I mean, that's one of the main things about censorship, is that they put you in this spot and you think you're either crazy for thinking what you're thinking, or you think that you're alone, in which there's nobody else think that way. And now with the existence of social media and some of these new tools, we use Signal a lot. We use a lot of the kind of the tools that are encrypted and etc. I mean, we are now 4.8. Actually, we're not more than 4.8 million. We started with 4.8 million, and we're now in an increase of about 100,000 followers almost every month.
Wow.
It shows is that there are a lot of people who think alike and would want this access the same things and like to be exposed to different ideas, and that constantly gives me a lot of hope and inspiration to keep doing what I'm doing, because I'm not speaking to a wall. I'm actually speaking to tens. Now maybe we're going to reach tens of millions in a couple of years, and the demand for people who live in authoritarian societies to be free is actually definitely there. And I think is that there is a lot of room to actually help these people and make them access the information that everybody around us here access.
Man, that's awesome, man. To hear that you're getting almost 100,000 followers a month is incredible. What are the delivery methods for the literature that you guys are translating? Are they, does Amazon exist in Baghdad? You know, okay, I mean, how do people get the literature?
So they get the literature from multiple sources. The main one is our website, in which people can just go to the book and download it as a PDF for free. We have multiple partners who distribute the books through encrypted messaging. So that's like Telegram, Signal, etc., in which there are a lot of groups, kind of like, think of it as like a black market for literature. So there are now like groups existing on Telegram and Signal, etc., in which people circulate banned books, censored material.
Wow.
And nobody knows who is the sender, nobody knows who's the receiver, just people sending information and then be able to access a PDF in which they can, and we teach them, we do run a lot of workshops and also videos about how to stop people from being tracked, how they can like delete the file if they get stopped by the government or things like that. So that way they're able to keep their privacy and security. And so that's really the main tools that we have, the website, and even like sometimes we don't even do anything. Like I'm in a Telegram group of kind of journalists, etc. And then somebody's like sharing one of the books we made available to their followers. So in a way, that's like other people's networks is how some of the books get spread. So really a combination of our website and then the tools that are more pro encryption and privacy is what we use to share information.
What are some of the levels at which people in certain countries, mainly, I guess, the theocratic countries that are sort of governed by Islam at this point, what are the levels at which they can access the internet? Or do people need to use VPNs? Obviously, encryption helps for trackers and intelligence services, I guess, state actors that are trying to stop those the receiving and reception of those books in this literature. What are the different levels of internet access in these places?
So very good question. It's definitely very different. And there was something really important happened. So back in 2005, when I was in the scene and using some of the same tools, it used to be only like those who spoke English or kind of more tech savvy, etc., were aware of VPNs and aware of some of these technologies. Now these technologies are very mainstream. And they're very mainstream for actually a lot of different reasons. And one of them is that forget about people accessing banned material. That people want to see movies and people want to see other information. So these, and through the work of a lot of organizations that existed before us, and they still work in that they made these VPNs and most of the technologies available for the masses. So most people in countries like Iran, they have one of the heaviest censorship. So for multiple reasons. Number one of the reasons actually because of the sanctions. So many American companies cannot operate there. So people cannot access because these companies are banned to operate in Iran. So in that way, people need to use a VPN anyway to be able to access Zoom or be able to access Google Mail or anything like that. So that's where you see like there's a very heavy penetration of VPNs for people actually to use it, to be able to even use the internet, because otherwise they will not be able to. And then there is like countries which are very like amazingly difficult, like Yemen, in which not only the infrastructure as a whole is pretty much destroyed, and they're in constant stage of war, to the way that most people do not have a lot of high-speed internet or able to do streaming. And then there is government censorship, like in Turkey, they banned Wikipedia for a couple of years, in which you cannot access it, so you have to use a VPN to access it. So the levels actually.
I'm going to make a joke. Now they only have Turkeypedia. It's the stupidest thing I've ever said. I apologize. I've put a damper on this entire interview because of my stupidity. Continue.
No, yeah. So it depends on really, I mean, pretty much most of the Middle East have censorship laws. It's all, whether it's censorship on books that are published. In Saddam's Iraq, I mean, and there was actually research done on that. There were more books that are banned than books that are read. So what the government did is that they have like pretty much destroyed the psyche of reading in the first place, which is like, don't read, this is all wrong. So the way that they banned more books than people were able to read. So that's like the more extreme case. But then the rest is, all the three countries like Tunisia, where kind of things are a bit more on the open side. Morocco has some kind of openness to some level. And the openness obviously differs. Some allow, like countries like Morocco, for example, allow like maybe books that are more liberal, secular around, but books about political, like freedom of speech or freedom in general, that's banned. So that they might allow some things to be available, but so like social freedoms maybe, but anything above that, political freedom is not really. So they ban one thing and allow the other. So there are definitely like a spectrum of censorship. Yemen being one of the most difficult. Iran is obviously on the top. So is Syria. In which you might get into a lot of trouble from accessing just basic things on the internet. You might get trouble, and then you might end up in an internet cafe, and the guy who is in the internet cafe works with the intelligence. So he looks at you and he sees you're watching a website that he doesn't like, calls the police, and you might end up in prison.
The Gestapo, or yeah, it's amazing how many people here don't understand how important the Bill of Rights is and freedom of speech and some of the amendments that we have, and they're slowly being eroded. Which, well, first I wanted to cite a statistic that I'm sure you know already. The country of Spain has translated more books in the last 50 years into Spanish than the entire Arab world, to my knowledge, has done in the last like 700 years. I don't know how they can sort of quantify translated books from.
Yeah, that's what the UN Development Report.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's an old report, but it's yes, it says like the rate is 1 to 1,000. So like 1,000. There are more books translated to Spanish in 1 year than Arabic in 1,000.
Well, I think that the Ideas Without Borders is absolutely fantastic. So you please, for the good of the world, continue with that, and I know you will. Well, I want to ask, what are some parallels that you see between? This is kind of taking a little sidestep. What are some parallels that you see between some of the sort of top-down control and censorship that you see in Iraq or Iran or parts of the Islamic world or other underdeveloped countries, third world countries, whatever term you want to use, and 2021 United States?
Yeah, I think there are definitely parallels to be, and that's where like kind of the conversation of cancel culture comes from, because in a way, authoritarianism takes a very different shapes and forms. And one of the forms is self-censorship. And it is self-censorship because there is a zeitgeist that exists that in a way gets you to speak things that otherwise you don't speak, or you have to fake it to some level. So in a way, like the Middle East is like a violent cancel culture. It's a more extreme version of what cancel culture can actually lead. And then the other way is like, the subject of polarization. In ways that what civil war is like, that is the end level of polarization. That is when people get super politicized, whose political identity or religious identity becomes like it's their identity of how people really see themselves. You can definitely see some parallels here in terms of how people identify politically and how that is amazingly important to them, and in the way that they are willing to ditch friends and family and others just because, I'm a liberal, they're conservative, they're liberal, etc. Even though I would now I think about it, like sometimes it's more like liberals who don't like conservative friends than conservatives who don't have liberal friends, at least from my New York experience. But so there are definitely parallels. I think is that there is definitely seeds for what is happening in the Middle East in terms of the kind of the most extreme versions of things, in terms of literally like authors being beheaded, into really kind for having an opinion that is the mainstream does not approve of, or really the governments don't approve of, into kind of now in which if you express a dissent opinion of some sort, yes, you will not get beheaded, you will not get killed, but you might lose your job. You might face a lot of kind of social pressures and dynamics that force you to fake it and not really express any of your thoughts. And that's a killer of independent thought, because now it's like you cannot, if you always have to appease and you always have to play the game, then you're really not much thinking for yourself. You have to just go with the flow and have really little room, because there is a cost for independent thought. Even if that independent thought led you to say crazy shit or believe stupid stuff, at the same time, independent thought is independent thought. I mean, the idea is that you can develop your own opinions, not just follow because the culture says so or the society says so, you have to follow it. And I think there's definitely like a lot of work that needs to be done. Even, I mean, now, as you said, like some of these stuff are being eroded, to really fight hard for it. And I think is that there is a role. I mean, some people say it's like, oh, well, you do a lot of work in the Middle East, but how about what you do here? I think there is a role for people who actually lived in what real authoritarianism looks like to actually speak out and try to not educate, but let's say make Americans aware of what would be the end goal of when you take censorship too seriously, when you take when you take some of these things into the most extreme, like cancel culture, like polarization, they eventually end up in a very bad situation. It's a slippery slope to a very bad place. And I think that there is definitely a role for immigrants who actually came from many of these places to speak up and really try to bring awareness to because for those who are not aware, are just operating in a very theoretical kind of idealistic world. They don't know most of these consequences. I mean, I assume most people are motivated by good intentions, and they really don't think that much outside the bubble they're in or outside the source of information that they consume. So that definitely needs to change. And I think there's definitely a room for those of us who actually grew up in authoritarian societies to tell Americans what's like to when you take these ideas to the extreme, because we have lived under what the extremes look like.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about having an insight into the more worldly perspectives of what goes on, not just in Los Angeles or Portland or New York or where Austin, Texas, but around the globe, and having more of an insight into history and what people are permitted to do by the government and what they're not permitted to do. Yeah, Thomas Sowell said, the great Thomas Sowell said, if you're going to criticize something, always ask the question, compared to what after that. I think that's very pertinent. So cryptocurrency, I saw you at the Bitcoin Miami conference sitting there eating. Were you eating hummus? Actually, hold on, because that sounds super racist to anyone who doesn't know that you are a big hummus fan and you openly declare that you're a big hummus fan. Otherwise, I'm just like, oh yeah, we're eating hummus.
I was having a very bad Middle Eastern food. That's what I was having. Yeah. And it's definitely it's one of the first things that I seek in when I'm like around, and I was actually kind of surprised that there was Middle Eastern food at the Bitcoin conference.
Yeah.
But I know like there's a lot of demand for it because it's tasty and healthy, etc. But that was really bad. Yeah, and I regret the $10 that I spent on eating that, but I definitely enjoyed. I mean, I was definitely not there for food, but I definitely enjoyed the conference. It was an interesting exposure to like things that, in a way, I was forced to learn about because like the way now I see it is like cryptocurrency is like VPNs for money.
Nice.
So I was really introduced to that world through my friend Alex Blostein, who was like the one interviewing Jack Dorsey at that conference, and he's the one who actually brought me to the conference. He got me the ticket, and that's really how my intro to the cryptocurrency world is. That came in as this is a tool and this is technology that really can help people circumvent the censorship surrounded finances, surrounded money, and I have to learn more about it. And I think I learned something at that conference And we met there. That was like a month ago now. It's been like a
Yeah, what was that? The
end of May, I think, or end of June, like beginning of June.
the beginning of June. Yeah, I think it was the beginning of June, 4th and 5th, I think it was. But so
Yeah.
what are
That's a month ago,
I know yeah, I know you're short on time and everything, but just quickly, what how does your background with Ideas Without Borders and coming here and using your platform and your history to work hard to change the world, what are the parallels between your background in this sort of work and Ideas Beyond Borders and cryptocurrency? You kind of summarized it a little bit, but maybe you could elaborate on a little bit more about what interests you about cryptocurrency.
There's privacy. The privacy and free speech elements. So we have faced a lot of difficulties paying a lot of our staff and our people who work in the Middle East for us, and for the same reasons that I was mentioning, is that you pay people through Western Union, and then let's say the person who works at Western Union, like not let's say the person who works at Western Union, but the seller who uses Western Union might work in the intelligence, and then he notifies the government that there's this person getting money from America, and then as a result they have to be interrogated, and we have one of our people had faced that interrogation and things like that through utilizing like the normal fiat money, and the tools of the fiat money. So my interest really is, as I said, is like VPNs for money. So that this is a way in which many people, I look at it as a twofold situation. Most people in Iraq and even countries in the Middle East don't have bank accounts. It's a cash-based society. So pretty much most of your assets are physical. You have a safe in your house, and that's where you put money or cash, or you put like in gold, you buy gold and then you put it in the safe. And then if the militia comes into your house, then they take everything. And so this could be like a way for even the general public in most of the region. And we have been partnering, and actually have received multiple donations from MobileCoin, which is now going to be the kind of the Signal cryptocurrency. So they're going to integrate soon, in which you can send money through Signal, either in US dollars or cryptocurrency. And this is an organization, because of our huge interest in use of Signal, it was really a match made in heaven, is that there is definitely room for us there. So that is where the interest really comes in, is that banking the unbanked, which is really providing the idea can have a digital wallet that is so easy to open through an app or something like that. So there's that aspect, and also the other aspect of really supporting dissidents and critics of government. And there is like, and I'm not trying to sound like this is like I'm supporting crazy people. The cost for getting in jail in most of the Middle East countries is actually very little. Like sometimes all you have to say is like, oh, women have rights, and then it's like you end up in jail. Like it's really not. I'm not talking about like somebody being super vocal or trying to like overthrow the government. It's more like basic things. Like for example, Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia, he had a blog which is like, oh, women need to have rights. So what if women go to the cinema? All that stuff. 10 years in jail. So in a way is that the cost of really being censored and cost of being like end up in jail is really pretty low. Mm-hmm. So it's not pretty high, like it's easy. Like there's not really, the threshold is really,
you don't have to do much. Yeah,
you don't have to do much. So these are tools that could really benefit. This technology could really benefit people over there. One of the examples we utilize, actually two examples. One is a comedian. He works in like one of these areas in which speaking against the Ayatollah is very painful, and he runs it anonymously. And he's afraid of utilizing the usual tools of Western Union, etc., because he might get caught, and we are able to support him. He was now able to get a better microphone, etc. Otherwise, if we use the usual money, we wouldn't be able. Wow. There are gay shelters in many of the countries in the Middle East. The punishment for being gay is death. So there are gay shelters, and it's not easy for them to utilize the usual methods of payment that people use. So I'm not like that type of, in the conference, there was these people who were like, screw the US dollar, or screw the banking system. I don't necessarily see this as either or. You can have all of these. I think the technology is very fascinating. I think the dollar is definitely not going to go away anytime soon, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. And then there's like things that these technologies are being evolved in the blockchain and etc. which really could be revolutionizing. It can really put privacy, some tools are privacy centric and etc. that could really help and elevate millions, if not tens of millions, people around the world who otherwise would have to be stuck in a very more archaic cash-based society. And I think this could be the new, because countries like things like Visa and MasterCard and all that, they will not operate in many of these war zones. They number one, there is not big business. They're not going to make tens of millions of dollars operating there. And also there's not much infrastructure that, and there's no credit card processing thing in supermarkets in Iraq. You carry like $200,000 dinars and then you go to the store and then you pay for it. And at the end of the day, like my mom who lives in Texas, withdraws the cash from the ATM because she always thinks that you only have to pay the supermarket by cash. She does not think of that the card itself can be, you can use it to pay people. So I think is that it really could revolutionize and the lives of tens of millions. And that's where like my excitement really comes in. And I think is that, and we have run a couple of videos already, just kind of telling people about Bitcoin and kind of some other cryptocurrency, and we'd love to do more. It's really getting as many people to have a wallet as possible, and maybe there will be, you create a market, there will be more uses of that. People can pay for, I saw like 10 days ago, there's a website that you can pay a flight ticket on Bitcoin. So in a ways that you don't really need to convert to dollar or to dinars. So I think it's like the more you circulate the economy, the more people can use it. I think we can really revolutionize the economies in many of these countries that need to be connected, that need to be modernized, and this would be the way to do it.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. I think you're integrating cryptocurrency into ideas beyond borders, and the work that you're doing it's a match made in heaven. It makes sense.
Pretty much. And yeah, it's no surprise that I was there.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, it was so good to talk to you. I feel I would love to talk to you more. I know you're short on time. But I can't thank you enough for being on and chatting with me. It was so cool to see you at the Bitcoin conference. I love all the work that you're doing. Where can people, so what's the Ideas Beyond Borders website? What's your social media? How can people find out more about what you're doing and be involved?
Sure. And now we have a donate by Bitcoin.
Nice.
And it is ideasbeyondborders.org. So that is our website. We actually, if people are interested, we now have like to know more about stories about people in the Middle East. We now have a blog in which we feature many of these freedom fighters, in which people can hear about their stories, and they can donate to us. We now have a crypto option and they have a US dollar option. Both work. Both are considering that we're using crypto to pay people there. Both are both can work for us. So
that's awesome.
Ideasbeyondborders.org. That's how people can find us.
What about is there social media? Is there Twitter? Is there Instagram?
Yeah, so everything is on the website. So it's really like if you go to ideasbeyondborders.org, there's all the buttons, and then it will be, because I think it's like some were taken. So some are like Ideas B2, which is for Twitter, Ideas Beyond Borders for Facebook, and I think Instagram Ideas_Beyond_Borders. So all of them, but all of them are on the website. So that's how, and people, I mean, my name, I'm sure is going to be on the title of the episodes. And then from that, they can, they just search my name, the first thing that shows up is Wikipedia, but the other thing is my website, where you can actually see most of my social media accounts there too. Nice, man.
Yeah, I'll put links to in the description below. And then last but not least, best hummus spot, best Middle Eastern food spot in America.
In America, well, I mean, if you want to get it closer to authentic Iraqi food, is Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah,
that is where, and there is a restaurant called Ishtar, which is kind of like the gates of Ishtar. That is in Dearborn, I believe, which like gets you as authentic as it can get when it comes to Iraqi food. There's a very good place, and I mean, in LA, you have a lot of Persian food. So there's like some Iranian restaurants which are like decent, but I think is that the Dearborn, you can definitely get a very good Dearborn, Michigan. And so Ishtar will be my favorite. And then there's a very good place in New York called Baladi, so Balde, which is my country. It's a Lebanese restaurant. Very good hummus. Actually, if you want hummus, Lebanese are the place to go. Nice, Iraqis suck at hummus. We add a lot of olive oil. It's a lot on the sour side. It's not really that but Lebanese restaurants is where you want to go to hummus, as they say in Arabic, and then the baladi one in New York is pretty good for that.
Well, if any Iraqi hummus makers hear this interview, it's not going to go well. They're not going to be reading any of your books anytime soon, unfortunately. But well,
they will love. But we have a lot. We have a pretty unique. I mean, we have in Dearborn, you can actually have Iraqi, like kind of close can get to Iraqi food, and you have like grilled fish, which is with mesgoof. That's like a unique Iraqi meal, and then there's ozi, which is another Iraqi meal. So there's like good. I think Iraqis listening here will love. I think they all agree with me that Dearborn is the place to go, and San Diego, but Dearborn is where it's at.
Well, I think food. I'm going to start a nonprofit, Food Beyond Borders, and that's how I'm going to connect people.
You're going to unite much more people than I do. Yeah.
I doubt that, man. I think you're doing great things, Faisal. It was a pleasure having you on, man. I can't thank you enough for giving me your time, and I really appreciate what you're doing. I hope everyone goes to your website and checks that out and follows the social media and just has more conversations like this one. And thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon, man. Take care.
Take care. You too.